let's go ahead and put together the first CRUD operation here, which is going to be create. In this case, it's just an add operation. So public void, not returning anything. I'm going to say add item. And to add an item, we're going to pass an item object here, right? That we created earlier. So in this case here, I'm going to, of course, invoke the SQLite database called db is equal to this.getWritables, right? Because we want to make sure that we are able to write to our database here. And then we are going to use the content values, there we go. Called value is equal to new content values as such. Okay, and then I'm going to say values dot put. What I'm going to put? Well, I'm going to put inside the key, it's going to be the key of the item. So in this case, constant dot key baby item. What am I going to add? Well, I'm going to say item dot get item name, like that. Okay, do the same for others. Put constant, if I can, constants like that. Key, in this case, I'm going to go to color. Pass in the color, say item dot get color, item color, there we go. Values dot put constants. Next is going to be quantity, so key ty number, item dot get quantity. And say size, item dot get size. And last but not least, values that put constants is going to be date, key date name. Now, on a date here, what we're going to do here is we're going to automatically retrieve the timestamp at which the item was added into the database. Okay, so now this timestamp here is going to be a very long number, hence we added a long as a type. So to do that, we're going to go say Java. I'm going to invoke the Java namespace .lang .system, like that. I'm going to say current times millis, like that. So this will give us timestamp of the system. It's just going to be a very long number, which we're not very interested in. We're really looking at it right now. Okay, there we go. So once we have that, of course, there's a few things we need to do. Well, as you very know, we need to go ahead and insert the row. How do we do that? We say db.insert, and we're going to pass our table, so constants.table name, and I'm going to pass null for columns, and I'm going to pass the values, and voila. At this point, I can come here and say log d and say added item, like that. And the tag, I'm just going to say db handler. Okay, there we go. So there we go. So once we add an item, we're going to pass the item object and of course invoke the SQL database instantiation here to make sure that this is indeed writable. And then of course we use our content values and we add items inside of our object values here, to which then we're going to put inside of our database. In this case, inside of our table. Okay, very good. So at this point here, I can come down here and do the same for our get an item. To do that, I'm going to say public, and because I want to get an item, I'm just going to make this an item so that it returns an item, right? I'm going to say get item, and I'm going to pass int ID because each item, of course, is going to have an ID. All right, so at this point here, I'm going to do the same thing, SQL database db is equal to this that get readable, because now I'm going to be able to read our database. So I'm going to create a cursor such is equal to db.query, because we're going to pass a query here. What query? I'm going to have to pass the constants.table name. And then next, I'm going to be able to then pass a string of objects here that we are going to specify what is exactly we're going to be getting. So in this case, I'm going to say new string. Okay, and I'm going to put inside here constant.key ID, right? Like that. And then next, inside, I'm going to pass a constants.key item, baby item in this case. That's what we're going to be getting. and I'm going to continue constants dot quantity. I'm going to continue constants dot size, and then constants date. All right, so and then what we're going to do is we're going to add the actual key ID, which is what we are going to be passing here, and we're trying to get that from, right? So I'm going to say constants. If I can type, of course, it seems to be hard these days. That DB key, I want the key ID as such, and because we are querying, I'm going to say plus. I'm going to give there the equal exclamation mark as such. Okay, pass another new string object here or array, which will contain a few other texts here. I'm going to go ahead and pass the string that value of, I'm going to pass the ID, which is going to be passing at the top here. In fact, let's see, int ID that it is. Okay, and of course we need to pass a few other things here to finalize. It's going to be null, null, and null. Let's see, I think it needs another null here, like that. Okay, so there's a few things that perhaps are not quite. Let's see what is happening. Oh, right. This here I should put inside of like that and finalize it there. Okay, looks like, let's go there and finalize there. Okay. And this should be, let's make it all in one line. Maybe that will make sure that we have everything and we don't need this. There we go. Of course, at this point here, I'm going to come here and say return null for now, but we're going to return something, obviously. Okay, so at this point here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say if, I'm going to make sure our cursor is not null. And then if that's the case, I'm going to say cursor.move to first, like this. Okay, so that means we have something and we can go ahead and start moving to the next items that we are trying to get. In this case, just an item. All right, so here I'm going to create an item object, call this item. I'm going to is equal to new item as such. Item.set ID as such, and I'm going to pass, of course, the ID. How do we get the ID? To get ID, we can actually use the cursor because the cursor will have all that information. I'm going to say .get string as such, and I'm going to pass the actual column ID. But there's a few ways we can do here. I can go ahead and pass the column index here by saying again cursor.get column index, and I'm going to pass the constant key. Okay, key ID like that. We got a problem here because this is going to return, of course, a string and we need an integer. So we're going to have to use the parse int, which is going to go and take this and make it all an integer. Okay. Now this is going to give us a little bit of a warning saying that this method invocation may produce a Java lang pointer exception there. Click here and say, we can put surround with if not null there. That also works. Okay, so make sure that the cursor is not null, because if it's null, then that's going to happen. In fact, we could have done all of that inside of a cursor not null there, but it's fine because we can actually come up and do this the same way. Okay, just to make sure that we're not trying to get something from a null object. Okay, very good. So I can keep going here. I can say now item dot set item name. Right, I'm going to use cursor again, .get string. Again, this is a different way of getting items from our cursor. We saw a different way of doing the same thing prior, but it's nice to have a different way of doing things. So I'm going to do the same thing here, get string. I'm going to say cursor again, .get column index. I'm going to pass constants, .key baby item, like that. So item .set quantity. I'm going to say cursor dot get int in this case because we are getting item quantity, and remember the quantity is indeed an integer, so I'm going to have to say get int. So cursor dot get column index, constant again, quantity, number like that. So item dot set size, again cursor dot get int, cursor dot get column index, constants dot size. Now for the date here, we have to do something else because, like I said, the date, it is in a format that is not very readable. So it's going to be something like this. a very gibberish number. So we want to make it prettier so that we can actually see it. So what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to go ahead and convert time stamp that we're getting to something readable like that. So this is what I'm going to be doing in the next video. But for now, what I want you to do is to do some quick research and find out how to convert timestamp in Android into a readable date. Do some Googling and see if you can come up with something. Okay, good luck, and I'll see you next.